Yeah, I love hiring recent grads because they are filled with knowledge that's fresh and new, and I love that. And in order to hire them, I require several internships. I won't review a resume that doesn't have at least two internships on it. And I like certain curriculum that they, take and have because I know the type of projects that they're working on, especially in that Penn State curriculum. Yes, there are some skills that are more important. Writing skills are critical because we are communicating with clients every day. Writing them emails, writing them status updates, writing press releases. Even though we have different departments that are doing a lot of the writing, some of our entry level employees are reviewing some of that content to make sure that it's what the client said they wanted in meetings that we had. I think I get a lot of questions about, how do I break through? How do I get into a company? And I would suggest that in this particular department, we're in communications. Communicate with those people. Find a company that you think you like and follow them through social and reach out to whoever you can. If it's a large company, just find a name of someone in the department. Find an alum, a Penn State alum, because we're crazy people. We love to connect with other alums. So breaking through for me was always easy because I would try to latch on to that. But I think that most people don't like to bug or annoy a person, and they feel that when in my experience, I find that a lot of young people are afraid to really make that phone call or reach out again because they did that 3 weeks ago. And so I highly recommend that students who are trying to get into any job find what they like about that company and and reach out to people to say, this is why I want to work here. I saw this recent news article, or I love that you do XYZ and I want to do that, or I want to learn more about it. And follow up, follow up, follow up. Every 3 days, I would suggest, is great. And then try to come up with something creative to send them to break through. And P.S. like the mail, the old fashioned like writing a note is real and never happens. So when that crosses my desk, I read every single one of them because it's few and far between. And I think that's what really, helps to break through. More successful candidates or team members that I have seen um, have an have an interest in learning. They don't come in thinking that they know it all because they did a few things out there in the world. And having those internships is important because that gives them that real world experience, in my experience. And I have found that ones who are successful in our firm are successful because they're following our processes. They don't try to reinvent the wheel. They may have ideas about doing something new or differently, which is great, and I love that. Bringing new ideas to the table is huge. Just because we've been doing it this way doesn't mean it's the best way. And when someone else comes up with a suggestion, I love that. But we do have processes. We're a boutique agency in the way that we're small, but big and mighty. We have a lot of clients, a lot of moving pieces, and when our processes aren't followed, the whole thing breaks. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I don't find that a lot of team members new to the world, the career world, or veterans in the business, a lot of times they don't come to the table with new ideas. And I don't know if that's because they're afraid to speak up or they just decide, well, that's just the way we do it. So I always encourage them to bring something new to the table. And I always am saying, this is the way, this is how we do it. But if you find that there's a different way or you worked somewhere else and you did it differently, I'm all ears on, collaborating and trying to figure out a new, better way that makes the whole team better. So I'm always trying to encourage them to do that. I would suggest as advice, just to do it and to find out maybe why we do it a certain way and ask those questions, because there probably are reasons or rationale behind it. And then if you have the idea of doing it differently, just say it. Just speak up. When I first graduated out of Penn State, I went to work for a TV station, and I sold airtime. So I was a TV sales executive, and there were things that we did that were very antiquated. And I was, because I'm old and graduated a long time ago, I was the first entry level person that the city had ever hired out of college. They never had an entry level position available, open, or were even open to it. So my first scrap to get in was just to get the job, to even create the job. I positioned the job to them. I provided the skill set that I thought the job would need as an entry level person. They didn't have none of the TV stations in the Pittsburgh market where I started. None of them had entry level. Entry level was unheard of. And so that was my first attempt at getting in, making this happen, and creating it. And it worked, and they took it kicking and screaming and basically said, good luck. And then once I was in, they had processes in place that were so antiquated. And slowly but surely and little by little, I would ask a lot of questions. Why do we do it that way? Or what happens next? I'm seeing this piece of it, but then what? Because the TV station was a big corporation. I mean, it was, CBS TV station. So they were corporate and driven by corporate. So they had a lot of processes, but corporate processes. And most of the time that was the answer, was that, well, that's the way corporate requires it. And that's the pitfall or downside to working for a very large company, is small companies usually have more wiggle room to change, as opposed to being run by a corporation.
Ways that someone could make that.
Yeah, we work with a lot of institutions of higher education and on the graduate side. As an agency, we specialize in that graduate student who is potentially transferring or changing jobs. And so there is a psychology behind it, that I'm familiar with, but I would recommend, if someone is doing that, that they learn as much as they can. If they're jumping ship and trying to make a change, try to determine why, and what that change is that they're really looking for. What is it? When I'm interviewing someone, I always say, you're here because of this position that you applied for. But if you had an opportunity to write every line item for everything you would be doing during the day, in essence, creating your own job responsibilities, what does it look like? And then try to find that position out there that fits them. Because if it doesn't fit them, they're going to make this change and then hate their lives. I mean, they have to love what they do. And I find that in the communications world, there's so many different things that you can do. The other tricky part is learning what the title is of that person. I find that, titles are so important, but every company calls their employees something different. My account managers might be an account supervisor in another company. Marketing assistants or marketing coordinators in my firm might be an account manager, frankly, at a different company. And so the title, you got to be careful getting hung up on the actual title itself, in my experience, because there's so many of them. But that's a way to find that career jump, is to determine what is the title in that company you're looking at. Yeah. I'm a believer of not meeting to meet. when I was younger and coming into the career, into my job, we would have meetings, and I would walk away from that meeting feeling like I needed to immediately meet again because we didn't really get anything done. So I am a huge stickler for lots of meetings. We have lots of meetings, but they're more collaboration meetings and working meetings. And they're to literally sit together and actually get the work done together. And since I am hiring a lot of entry level students right out of college, they require a lot of training. And so personally, I love the teaching part of it. I love the training part of it. And I don't mind sitting and collaborating to do the work so they can learn how to do it and then spin off on their own. But a really good day in my world is one where these meetings were productive meetings to get the work done, not just to meet again to discuss it again. We just discussed it for an hour. Let's part and now do the work. Someone who's open to trying it a new way, because our way or our processes may be different than they're used to, or not processes they had in school if they're entry level, or not at the last place they worked. And so I go back to the processes because we're set up almost very corporate because of so many processes. And I think a lot of people, whether they're doing a career change or coming right out of college, they think an advertising agency is so glamorous and, all creative, and it's great. And it is. I mean, we're an award-winning creative shop, but we do have processes that have to be followed. And in order to really make that work flow correctly, those processes are critical. So a good candidate or, a team member that's going to succeed is going to be following those.
What are you best
at? I am full tilt processor. Some people are visionaries where they have this big idea and they go after it. But visionaries usually are like squirrels chasing nuts because they have an idea and then they have another idea and then they have another idea. And those ideas never really come to fruition. So visionaries are great because they're the idea makers, but they're idea makers over and over and over and over again. And, an operator is someone who's getting the stuff done, but kind of in their own way and just getting it done. Forget the processes; they just get it done. And I like to say I'm a bit of a mutt. I have, of course, the visionary world, or I wouldn't have started the company. Never worked, never having worked in an advertising agency. But I'm an operator only sometimes when I really need to get something done. For the most part, I'm a processor. So my best skill set is making sure we get from point A to point Z with these processes to make it flow seamlessly so that we're not doing that over and over and over again, or we're not providing an ad to a client over and over and over again because we didn't listen the first time. I think my skill set is listening hard and being able to provide a client, a business, a nonprofit with what they've asked for or what they think they want, because I listened and I was able to understand what they were asking for, dissect it, and then provide some kind of deliverable. But that, I think, came with time. I think that's something that's learned. Learning how to take good notes in meetings, learning how to really understand what they need, and asking a question if I don't understand what they need. Let me understand exactly, this is what you're asking us to do, or this is what you want, or you think you want. And helping other businesses grow. I mean, we practice what we preach. We've been on the Inc. 5000 list 5 times because of the growth we've had globally. And so being able to really take our best practices and help other business owners implement those into their business. I'm extremely analytical. I love data. I'm a real data geek. And so taking all of those pieces and helping a business grow is really my specialty and what I love. Yeah. When I am reviewing a resume, they don't really get the interview unless that resume, so it all starts with that resume. I'm looking for the curriculum they had at school if it's an entry level person. If it's not an entry level person and it's someone who's in the business already looking to change their career, or just change jobs, sometimes that's a red flag for me, because if they've only been somewhere for a year or 6 months or 9 months, that's nothing. And so if I see that they've been somewhere for a year and then another place a year and then another place a year, that shows me that they haven't found their place, or they're not going to sit anywhere long enough, including my firm. So I'm always cautious in that. I always tell people that they should, in a meeting with students, for example, or other employees, I always tell them when you're in an interview, you should be interviewing that company just as much as they're interviewing you, because you're going to have to live with this place, 8, 9 hours a day, every day from now on. You better like where you're headed. And so they need to be asking a lot of questions if that interviewer isn't giving them a lot of information. And I think that's really critical. Yeah. Um, when I am reviewing a resume, they don't really get the interview unless that resume, so it all starts with that resume. I'm looking for the curriculum they had at school if it's an entry level person. If it's not an entry level person and it's someone who's in the business already looking to change their career, or just change jobs, sometimes that's a red flag for me, because if they've only been somewhere for a year or 6 months or 9 months, that's nothing. And so if I see that they've been somewhere for a year and then another place a year and then another place a year, that shows me that they haven't found their place, or they're not going to sit anywhere long enough, including my firm. So I'm always cautious in that. I always tell people that they should, in a meeting with students, for example, or other employees, I always tell them when you're in an interview, you should be interviewing that company just as much as they're interviewing you, because you're going to have to live with this place, 8, 9 hours a day, every day from now on. You better like where you're headed. And so they need to be asking a lot of questions if that interviewer isn't giving them a lot of information. And I think that's really critical. Sure. I, again, I'm a believer of asking questions. You're not going to learn unless you ask. And someone doesn't have to answer the question if you really ask something that's inappropriate or off kilter. And so asking point blank, what does a day look like in this position? What are some of the challenges I should expect if I come work here? What what is the work life balance like? Is there one? I I personally am a huge believer of work hard to play hard, and it might be cliche, but I don't want anybody working my hours. I don't expect anybody to get back to me on a weekend or after 5 o'clock. But between 8:30 and 5, those are my hours, and I pay my staff during that time. And I expect that between 8:30 and 5, they're working, doing their job, and then shut it down. So, I try to make sure we have that work-life balance, and they need to really be asking, what does work-life balance mean to you? I think students or anyone who's interviewing also needs to figure out, what does work-life balance mean? You know, what does that mean to you? And I think everybody might have a slightly different definition of that. So the first step is to figure out, what does that mean to you? And then when asking the question, ask it in a way that's going to be beneficial to you to know. After 5, you're done working. Or no, sometimes you might need to work on weekends. Is that okay? Those are things that I think people in general need to figure out for themselves, what they're okay with and what they're not okay with.
Cool.
Yeah.
What else?
No. No, there I haven't seen much change entry level wise. I have I have in one way. I feel that colleges and universities are trying to embrace new technologies and teach that, which I love and I love to see. I sit on several boards for several colleges around the country, and they consult with me on what they should be teaching as a curriculum. And I love that because I find that they're trying to learn what's out there so that they can support that. So yeah.